Okay, I've got 101 over here on my side, and we've got a pretty jam-packed, awesome webinar coming, so I don't want to waste too much time. So we're going to go ahead and get started while people continue to join. I want to start by saying hello, everybody, and welcome to our Derigo Network July Enhance webinar titled Best Practices for Onboarding New Employees. If you are new to our Enhanced Webinar program, DGN offers almost monthly webinars throughout the year that are totally open to the public. So that's men, women, members of Derigo Network, non-members, everyone is welcome. But of course, DGN members get some special perks like a free webinar in your birthday month. So if you aren't already a member, make sure to join by going to derigonetwork.com and clicking on the big join button. Membership is fast, free, and easy, and really helps you stay in the loop with all things DGN. I'm Amanda Borkowski, and I'm the Derigo Network staff lead for all of our enhanced webinars. I'm going to kick off today with just a couple of housekeeping announcements, some organization announcements, and then I'm going to hand it over to our speakers. So to start, I do want to give a special thank you to DGN's own Include initiative for sponsoring today's webinar, as well as Zoetis for providing the web hosting and recording for all of our enhanced webinars in 2025. A couple of notes about interacting today as you're getting settled and getting ready. Throughout the webinar, we do encourage you to use the chat feature to ask questions or leave comments and just interact. You can also unmute yourself and ask your questions along the way as well when you see space. And if you're worried about interrupting, there is a raise hand feature on Zoom that you can use. And then once you click that, somebody from the DGN team or our speakers will be able to help build space for you to interact and ask your question if it's easier to just voice it yourself during the presentation. But if you'd like to wait, there will also be some dedicated time at the very end for Q&A as well. Something we really like to do here is build community. That's what DGN's all about. And so with that, we really also like being able to see you during these webinars as well. So if you are comfortable and able, we would love to see you. Our presenters would love to see you. We ask you to turn your video on. Doesn't matter what you look like, where you are in the barn, in the office, we all get it. This is a space you can join without judgment and truly be a part of today's conversation. Okay. Before we dive into today's presentation and topic, I do want to just give a couple of DGN updates. Summer's here. We're all feeling the heat. We were just talking before this webinar started about a heat dome over the east, which sounds terrifying. But with summer, it's the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe and the latest DGN merch. Whether you're working in the barn or meeting up with friends, we have something for every occasion. We've got some really cute lightweight t-shirts, perfect for summer, or we've got some cozy vests and stylish crew necks that are really great if you're looking forward to the cool weather of the fall like I am. Brittany's going to drop a direct link in the chat for easy access if you want to check out our store. And also wanted to make sure everybody joining today is aware that we do have a private Facebook group. It's called Exchange by Derigo Network, and we encourage you to join and interact. Again, we'll put the link in the chat for easy access, but if you're not a member of the group, of the Facebook group, and you go to join, make sure you fill out all the questions. This space has over 5,500 highly engaged dairy women, and every month there are tons of organic conversations, from sharing big wins, asking questions to improve your farm, looking for recipes, fun stuff. The group's got it all. And so if you're not a part of it, I hope to see you there soon. And again, looking towards fall, which I certainly am, planning is underway for this year's World Dairy Expo. DGN is going to be hosting a handful of events during Expo, including our Connect networking event happening the Wednesday of Expo, October 1st in the evening, and a Tanbark talk co-hosted with NMPF's National Young Cooperators Program the morning of Friday, October 3rd. So mark your calendars for those. And for anyone traveling with a family to Expo or with little ones or new moms, DGN is proud to once again provide a dedicated family lounge at World Dairy Expo, and this is a quiet space to rest and recharge amidst the chaos of Expo's lively atmosphere. So make sure you're following us on social and you're getting our emails so you can stay up to date on announcements with all things Expo as we approach October. Now, in the very beginning of these announcements, you may have caught that today's webinar is sponsored by our own initiative called Include. Joining today is our Include chairwoman, Mary Knigge. And Mary, I would like to welcome you now to share a little insight about what Include is and how it's impacting the industry.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda. Great to be here with everybody today. As Amanda said, I'm the chairwoman of the Include committee within DGN. I also am the vice president of DGN and really excited to be here with you today to share a little bit more about Include. So back in 2020, I was asked to chair this committee, and we knew there were some really great things happening around the industry when it came to making women feel more included in the workplace, but people weren't talking about it. And so we held some summits and we had webinars, and we were really talking about some of the great work that was happening around the industry and ways to promote equity in the workplace. We discussed allyship, mentorship, and took a look at some barriers as well to making sure that women felt more included in the dairy industry. We then kind of shifted our focus to talking about on-farm equity. This was a more challenging discussion. Again, we knew there were some really great things happening around the industry, but people weren't willing to talk about it. And we wanted to share with our members, especially this topic, we wanted to share with our members some of the great things that were happening. Because we thought that a really solid onboarding process can make a huge impact in how your employees feel, how your employees participate in the workplace, and just making sure that everyone's on the same page when it came to your goals and your mission for your business. So I'm really excited to dig into this topic more today, and so thankful that we've got two DGN board members and leaders in the industry that are here to discuss and dive into this topic a little bit more. They have some great resources and tips and tricks and tools that they are going to share with you today. And I'm really excited to hear this discussion, and thank you all for joining today. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary, for giving us a little bit more insight, also for helping coordinate this webinar today. We really appreciate everything you do for us and DGN as a whole. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of today. So I'm going to start with Julie Patterson. Julie will be our second speaker today and is an owner of Patterson Farms, Inc., alongside her husband, John, at their 6th-generation dairy and crop farm in Cayuga County, New York. They are currently milking 1,800 cows, raising 1,100 heifers, and cropping 2,500 acres. Patterson Farms' #1 farm value is the safety and well-being of the people they work with each day. Julie's responsibilities at Patterson Farms include financial management, HR management, safety training, social media, outreach, and workforce development. Julie completed the Cornell Dairy Executive Program in 2004, and she serves on the New York State Dairy Promotion Order Board and is involved in workforce development for agriculture in her community. And then Jennifer, who is going to be our first speaker and who I'll hand it off to in just a second, is one of 9 children raised on her family dairy farm in Tulare County, California. She was active in her local 4-H and junior Holstein clubs and enjoyed raising replacement heifers, registered Holsteins, and showing cattle. Jennifer's career has combined her passion for the dairy industry with her keen interest in software and technology. The bulk of her career was as an IT director for Worldwide Sires, and in 2019, she and her husband, Phil, had the opportunity to relocate to the beautiful Central Coast, where she discovered and soon joined the Milc Group team. Jennifer is Vice President of Product, heading up Milc Group's people management and employee training software products, and as Mary said, both of these gals are really influential members of the Dairy Girl Network board. And so with that, Jennifer, I will hand it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you, Amanda. Let me share my presentation. Seen it okay? Good?
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Amanda. I'm very excited to be with you today to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited to team up with Julie. I'm going to be kind of giving a higher level background on the hows and whys of onboarding and sharing some tips and resources. And Julie's going to be able to give you real world examples of how they have implemented strategies on their onboarding program. So very excited about this topic. And even though our talk is going to be geared to dairy farmers, the concepts and strategies that we're talking about today are applicable universally across all types of organizations and business sectors. So I think this is a very important and timely topic that we're starting with today. And this slide, I am fully convinced that onboarding done right can be a game changer in any organization. It really does drive employee engagement. It does boost productivity, and it creates that loyalty so that you can keep those good employees, but it needs to start from day one. So why do we need onboarding? Onboarding is more important now than ever, and not just in the dairy industry. It's an area that has been neglected in a lot of business sectors, but a lot of the things and reasons that impact dairy also impact many businesses. We know that the labor landscape in dairy has been changing and will continue to change as we are depending more on non-family labor. A high percentage of our labor are immigrants, which brings new challenges all of its own. And one of those, from the inclusive perspective, is the language barriers, understanding cultural differences, and literacy challenges. And then the other thing we're seeing is fewer people, new hires are coming to the farm, have previously even worked with livestock or have experience around the equipment and machinery that we have on our farms. And that leads into a challenge of, keeping our employees and our animals safe and healthy. Across the United States, we're seeing a shrinking labor force. And it's not just in dairy. Birth rates are decreasing, and boomers are leaving the work market. Employee turnover is high everywhere, but it's traditionally been very high in dairy. And we're competing with a lot of other job sectors. So that even puts more pressure on really trying to find and keep good employees. Also, there's a skills gap. As our farms are changing, we're incorporating more technology, even incorporating automation. Our employees are going to need a new skill set, maybe a little more advanced skill set in the past. And currently there are thousands of unfilled dairy jobs. And there's prediction there's going to be 5,000 unfilled dairy jobs by 2030. So it's kind of scary. And another thing we have going against us is we are located in rural sections, so that limits our pool of employees further, and the social isolation that can come with that can make job satisfaction a challenge. And let's be real, dairy work is physically demanding. It's hard. And it seems our society does not value hard work like it once did. And it can be dangerous. So there's a lot of challenges, but there are answers. And there's a lot of costs associated with these challenges. The number one being turnover. Our average turnover rate in the dairy industry is between 30 and almost 40%, well above a national average. And this is just one example. The cost is about 150% of a salary. So if we as business owners or business managers really take a look, are we measuring what our turnover rate is? We're measuring what our calf mortality rate is. We know what our involuntary cull rate is. are we measuring our employee turnover rate, and are we measuring how much that's costing us? So one estimate here, and this is very minimal, is the cost of hiring and onboarding a new employee is about $4,000 per new hire. But that doesn't include a lot of the hidden costs of when you have those unfilled jobs, it creates lower productivity, and it's going to impact milk quality, our product quality. There can be a loss of morale on your existing team. And when we lose, especially if we lose a good employee who's been with us for a while, we lose that company knowledge. So I don't think, so this is why. And I think in our industry and in others, we need to have a mind shift on our priority for human resources and how we treat people. So just some food for thought. Farms have invested heavily in improving cow comfort, health, and welfare. Yet we fail to apply these same principles to one of our most important assets, and that's our human workforce. I saw this quote in an article in the Bovine recently. If you spend more on metabolic disease prevention than on employee onboarding, you're fundamentally misallocating resources. So maybe we need to think about that a little bit. So what exactly is employee onboarding? Many of us think it's that, first day paperwork, here's your uniform, park over there, see you tomorrow. No, onboarding, the definition is a structured plan for integrating new hires into your organization and helping them understand their roles, the company's culture, and the necessary procedures. But an effective onboarding plan is really about helping new employees feel connected to the purpose, culture, and people of the organization. And I think this is an area where we tend to miss the mark. An effective onboarding program, if we make the investment in time and in our people, the return is significant. And if we don't, the cost is significant. So studies have shown that employees that have experienced a positive onboarding experience are 69% more likely to stay with an employer for 3 years. We're addressing that turnover. They're 50% more productive. If that's not enough to justify it, I don't know what else. And they're 54% more engaged. They're more productive. They're going to make fewer mistakes in critical areas like milking, feeding animals, and animal handling. I think that's kind of priceless. Increased engagement, there's going to be job satisfaction. With job satisfaction, there's going to become some loyalty, and people are going to stick around. But it also means there's going to be better attention to detail. Our employees are going to be more proactive in making decisions and better at solving problems, and more likely to genuinely take more care in following the standard operating procedures and processes that we have established on our farms. So what makes up an effective onboarding system? Where do we start? How can we create that environment that's going to help us find, attract, train, and keep the best employees? I would first challenge you to just take a step back and look at your current process. And then I would ask you to put yourself in the place of a new employee. And, starting a new job can be intimidating all by itself. We've all probably done it, right? Put yourself in the place of a new employee that may have never been around livestock before, doesn't speak the local language or doesn't speak it very well. There are a lot of nerves. There's a lot going on when they step onto your farm. And first impressions do matter. And so we have to be careful. That first day is very important. But it's only the start. That's not your onboarding program. That's just the start. But we've got to make them feel welcomed. We need to make them feel valued. They need to understand what it is that they're getting into, right? And we also have to be careful that we don't overwhelm them. So with that in mind, the 4 C's is a great mnemonic to help you evaluate your current onboarding program. You put yourself in that place and you look at the 4 C's and say, okay, how am I doing in these areas? Where am I lacking? So the first one up there is compliance. And most of you are probably handling most of the compliance. Otherwise, you're facing some fines from state and for federal and state. So this is your legal policy related actions like your documentations, your I-9s, your W-4s, your handbook, your new employee policies. This is when this includes, getting that animal care agreement signed and that part. Very important, needs to be done. Most of that needs to be done very early on. The next one, C, is clarification. Now, this is an area where we all probably can improve. Employees need to know what is expected of them. They need to know what the job entails and what are performance standards. And do we have a job description? Are we giving our new employees a job description that outlines what skills are needed? What are expectations? Are we providing the training they need to be successful and safe in their job? Clarification also means, especially when we are working with the language barrier, the cultural barriers, communication can be a real challenge. So we need to take extra effort to clearly explain what it is that we expect, what the job entails. We have to be very careful not to assume. The third is another area where I think we all can improve. And this one is very, very important, and that's connection. Connection is establishing the relationships with a new employee with the managers, supervisors, co-workers, maybe setting them up with a mentor to help them out. But this is where the employee feels like they're part of the team. We spend long hours on a dairy farm, and they're away from our families. If we want employees to stick around and be loyal and be engaged, they need to feel connected. They need to feel they belong. And we'll talk about some ways we can do that. And then the third C is culture. They need to know about our business. They need a little bit of history of why we do what we do and what are our missions and goals and some of the standards we have set. And here's where we also talk about the purpose and the part they play, the very important part they play in helping to reach that purpose. In the dairy industry, we're helping to feed the world. And I think that's a message that we need to make sure we're getting across. So those are the 4 C's. So now I apologize, this is a very busy slide, but I wanted to capture some real ideas, concepts. We will be sharing these slides after the presentation. And so I just wanted to get this information in there, something that you can refer back to. Because, what are the keys for successful onboarding? And first we've got to think of, okay, what do new employees need? Because we need to fortify them with the training, the skills, the confidence to want to stay and to be successful and to be proactive. So the first is very easy, and many of you may have this, but if you don't, do it. Develop an onboarding checklist. There's a lot that goes into onboarding. There's a lot of details, and it's very easy for things to fall through the cracks. And it kind of goes with the next one, be consistent. By having a checklist, you can make sure you're consistently covering all the types of information that you need to share with your employees. And also, just like cows like us to be consistent, they want to be fed about the same time. They want to be milked about the same time. People are the same way. They want a consistent approach. And if we're not consistent with our onboarding, one person's got a great experience, another one has a poor experience, we're really setting ourselves up and the employee for failure. And part of being consistent, and this is something that I think many operations may have failed to do, and that is to designate an individual to ensure that onboarding is carried out and carried out consistently. If you don't have someone designated that's being held accountable, chances are it's just not getting done, and it's not getting done well. I said before that first impressions make a difference. It's really important. So when that new employee steps on your farm, you need to make her feel welcomed, valued, and respected. That's just a human need that we all have. And it's not hard to do, and it doesn't take much time. But are we doing it? And how do we do it? First off, maybe we need to inquire, what is your preferred name? We have nicknames, we have long names, be hard names to pronounce sometimes. What is your preferred name? Learn a little bit about them. And part of that is also, sharing your company culture, a little bit about why you do what you do. And that is developing that first relationship, right? One of the things that's kind of important here too is to show that you really care and about them is find out things like emergency contact information early on. You might ask, I was talking with a friend of mine, Elsie, who does onboarding, helps companies do onboarding. She says one of the things she's added to her list is find out if they have any allergies. She had an employee that had a gluten allergy, so that can be serious if they're sharing food in a break room or and that type of thing. But those types of things show that you care and that they're a person and you see them and you recognize them. And then it's very important because employees need to know who to go to for questions. So you should provide the contact information of their supervisor and their HR contacts and what they should do in the case of an emergency. An emergency action plan is very important. And then so they can become familiar and they can come ready to work is discuss their work attire, uniforms, laundry, personal protection equipment. It's also very important to make them feel comfortable with your facility. So facility tour, you need to go over and show the different parts of the farm and what your business rules there. So review the break room. Do you have lockers? The bathroom? Where should they park? Things like that. And another way we can make employees feel welcomed and valued is to also maybe share some community resources that are available, especially if they're new to your area. There's, share information, the contacts, and lots of times local libraries provide literacy and education and tutoring support. You can have your local housing authority may help with finding housing and medical. So those are other ways that we can help welcome and create that connection with new employees. It's also important right from the beginning to foster that culture of safety and explain how you prioritize that to help keep them safe and to keep our animals safe. And then it's the job training. Or you might do a combination of job training and a job shadowing, but this is another area where we all can improve. We might have some training here, we've got a video there, we've got this SOP here, but we don't really have a formal onboarding training plan. And that's a place where we invest a little bit of time, can make a big difference in helping to equip that new employee to be more productive, safer, with less accidents and injuries. And it's a great way to show that we value and respect their contribution to our farm. And then pairing with a mentor or buddies. This is really important to foster connection, so they have someone they can go to. And this is a great opportunity to get more people on your farm involved in helping with the training. And then follow up. So you just say, okay, here's your uniform, here's a bunch of training, have at it. We all need feedback. We need to know how we're doing. We need guidance to go along. So another piece that I think is oftentimes missing is scheduled regular check-ins and providing that user feedback. So this is just an example of what a new employee onboarding checklist might look like. Again, I want to have something in here just for you to reference. And then I wanted to share some examples of employee onboarding training resources. These are all resources geared towards the dairy industry. This is just a sampling. There are many, but I found these really did a good job of addressing both onboarding and employee training, and had resources in both English and Spanish. The resources at the top are all free resources, but the farm program has excellent resources to help with employee workforce development and onboarding. UMash has some great resources, University of Wisconsin and Cornell. And then if you need help with training, because that tends to be a real challenge, these are two tools that are out there that are geared specifically for dairies, will help you have a lot of resources already available if you don't have resources stored in a single place, and can also help with record keeping and that type of thing. So they are both online services that will deliver training in English and Spanish, and cover a full myriad of both safety, animal handling, and dairy training. And with that, I will hand it over to Julie to talk about what they're doing with their onboarding program at Patterson Farms.
Julie, before you get going, Jennifer, there's actually a question in the chat I'd like to ask right away.
Sure.
And that is, how soon after their initial onboarding would you recommend doing the first review check-in?
So within the first week, for sure. So it's great to, that first day, make sure that they don't have any questions, right? Ask if they have any questions before they leave that first day. But I think that first check-in should be done at week 1.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. We'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. That was really awesome. So I didn't see all of Jennifer's slides before. Bear with me here, everybody. I did mine. So I think it's good that this will go hand in hand together. So I think you'll get to see that I do a lot of those things that Jennifer was just talking about, but it hasn't always been that way here on our farm. I couldn't agree with Jennifer more that, to drive engagement, productivity and loyalty. You can really see that when you do extend some things with your onboarding program, and we've seen that here on our own farm. So I would encourage that for sure. So I also want to just say, like I said, this has been processed over the 27 years that I've been in this position at our farm. So it has evolved over the years, and this is what is working for us. And I'm always learning new things, like Jennifer just talked about, the allergies, and that's going to be something I'm going to put on my emergency contact list just for somebody to fill out, because that is great information to have. And you know, you'll have to look into like legal things for yourself. You know, I'm not sharing my forms specifically because I think it's important for you to develop those on your own and to make sure they meet all the requirements for your state and locations. So, but I will talk about, you know, what we've done and what we've evolved into over time. So we always did a really good job historically at our farm, I would say, with documentation. You know, it was always done quite well, I would say, the things to check the boxes that we needed to fulfill. And that in itself was really good, but it set the example for me as I took over those duties that was very important, and at the very least that needed to be done. But I think one of the things, you know, as we, my husband and I took over management of the farm, you know, things change. The workforce had changed. Trying to find people was different, and you really didn't know these people when they came onto the farm. So we really spent a lot of time developing our farm values, and that really helped guide us with this whole process of onboarding, because that lets people that are starting to work with us know what's important to us, what our priorities are, and that we make decisions based on our farm values. So that, I would say, is worth some time. I have found, our team has found, to really spend some time on that, because it does help guide you on this onboarding and other decisions that you make on your farm. And you can always go back and say, well, does that fit with our farm values? And, you know, it's been a good guiding force, I would say, for us on the farm. So, you know, once we did that, we also want to make sure when employees start with us, of course, there's all the forms that will go through the list of stuff that we do. But it's important, just like Jennifer was saying, those first 1 to 2 weeks are crucial for an employee to get a good start with your farm. You know, it's important for them to feel supported during that time and to really understand the expectations and have clarity there of what's expected of them and what we're, you know, doing to support them. So, and it goes back to that culture of your farm. If you really let them know what's important to you, which for us, the number one farm culture on our farm is safety. And we tell them that you're important to us. You're above the animals, which some people might, you know, but the people are what's important to us, number one, on our farm, because we want them to go home to their families each day. And of course, animal care is right behind that. But we have to make sure that the people that work with us each day are safe. So we take, you know, we have a safety committee at our farm. You know, we take that very seriously. If we have near misses, those are documented and reviewed to see what we can do different and get input from people on our team. So we also do a lot of job shadowing. We have really strived in the last 4 to 5 years to get people cross-trained on our farm, because as more people are taking advantage of paid time off, which is wonderful, you know, we need people to be cross-trained quite a bit so that they can cover for each other. And that's been really important in this job shadowing. So it gives like an overall view of the farm and not pigeonhole them into their one position, because it's important for them to see the big picture. If they're working in the farm or in the barn all the time, they don't even really know sometimes what's going on with the crop crew. And so we really do try to engage people and at least give them an idea of what's going on around the farm. We have found that to be important, and it wasn't always a priority, but we have found that to be important. So, and then, you know, we do a lot of training on safety, and then we do go through our farm policies, and we do a farm map with the pens and different things like that. So, you know, you get used to your own farm and you forget that it's new to people and that you need to take that time to really get them to understand. We have a bus on our farm, and our dairy manager said, I don't even think some of the newer people that work with us know exactly where all of the lagoons are. So we have a little bus and we put them on the bus and we drove around so that they could see. I think as our farms get bigger, we have to remember that they may not be able to see the whole thing. So you need to get them out and really get that big picture. So just remember, we are in New York, so we probably have some requirements that other states don't have. But this is, some of the list of what we have in our packet, that we go through with people when we onboard them. So we do have a new employee checklist for orientation, and I find that very useful. It helps me, it helps our supervisors when they're doing the onboarding, if it's not me, to make sure all those things are checked off. Of course, we have the regular documents in there. I will say, I think probably a lot of people do this, but for my own records, I have an I-9 retention form that I fill out for myself so that I know when those I-9s have to stay within those files. So if anybody has questions on that, I have found that to be, I've probably done it for 8 years now, but it's so nice to know exactly when to be able to pull those I-9s out when you don't need them anymore after somebody isn't employed with you anymore. So we do emergency contacts so that we know who to get a hold of somebody if unfortunately something happens. We review our farm values and our mission statements, the animal care agreement, the farm pen maps that we talked about, our work agreement, goes through even though this has this on our pay stubs, our work agreements in New York State have to have the pay rate, the hours, the days of work, the schedule, who your supervisor is, all that stuff is also on the work agreement. We have a farm handbook that goes through lots of stuff. It's, lots of in-depth policies on paid time off, equal opportunity, employment at will, trial periods, performance appraisals, standard of conduct. So that really helps. And that's also in Spanish also. So we go through that with people when we are doing this onboarding process. So hopefully if there's questions, or at least if there's issues later on, we can say refer back that we went through this when we were onboarding and this is how it is. So at least they're aware of what, the expectation is. So I think that is really important. I will say with our first farm handbook, we did it just is kind of loose, I would say. We didn't get a lot of input on it. And then probably 14 years ago, probably more than that now, I was like, well, I think I was at a training of some sort in New York State. I found out Department of Labor would come out and review our farm handbook, and they really helped me step that up. So I would say, look, if you have a farm handbook or you're looking to do one, look to your state resources or any of the other websites that Jennifer just put up, because they probably have some information too, but that really helps you get the legal part in there. That is helpful. And that was a free thing that the state was able to do for us. So, and then we update that, and then it's dated when it's updated so that we can keep track of that. So we have housing agreements and house rules, if that's applicable for those people. We have a welcome letter, we have cell phone and headphone policy, no solicitation policy, and we review the job descriptions. So that's a pretty comprehensive list of what we have in our packets when we get going with somebody started. We in New York State we were always pretty good about doing some training at hiring, but now it's pretty focused because years ago, we had a local emphasis program through OSHA where they were intensively checking dairy farms, or could stop in anytime at dairy farms basically to check on, they called it the dairy dozen. So there were different topics that we had to make sure that we were had trained our employees on. But I would say at first we were kind of overwhelmed with the whole thing, but it really turned out great. And it's worked very well to have it part of our onboarding program. And then it's done annually on top of that. So it also meets the requirements for farm and our cooperative. And it's just kind of what we do now. So it's not that big of a deal. But all of this is done for training when somebody starts. So hazardous materials, tractors and machinery, skid steers, bunk safety, confined spaces, animal handling, sexual harassment prevention. I'll come back to that. Lockout, tagout, manure storage safety, noise awareness, heat, cold, illness, and covers PPE. So what's provided, where they can find it, if they need something else to make their job, they feel safer, we'll certainly provide that for them. So the sexual harassment prevention, I just wanted to touch on that. That was a requirement that New York State came out with, I'm thinking 6 years ago, probably. And I was a little anxious about it, to be honest, when it first came out, just because I was like, my goodness, how am I going to do this without it? It was just uncomfortable at the time, I would say. But I'm really glad that New York State had made that a requirement, because I think the reaction to the training, and it's just that one more thing that we do to set the culture at our farm. I mean, we always, our farm was managed by my mother-in-law for 25 years before we managed it. So she, I would say the standards were probably a little different here than other places at that time. So, but it was really nice to see the reaction from our employees. We had, after our first training on it, we had two of our oldest employees come up and say, I'm so glad that this is happening. I'm so glad that this training is happening now, because we've seen our daughters deal with so much stuff at their workplaces that it's really important. So, and it's nice now that stigma has kind of, it's dissipated, I would say, with our annual training on this. Different people within our team do that training, and that really helps everybody be more comfortable with the topic, I would say. So it's kind of nice to have seen that evolve. Something that we were a little worried about is now not that big of a deal anymore, I would say. So
Julie, there's a really good question in the chat. With all these different levels of training, how do you make sure your new employees don't get overwhelmed? And, over how many weeks do you divide all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends on, we can kind of gauge a person, whether they're like, well, I need a break. And we'll break it up over a few days, because it is a lot to take in. And you want to make sure it is effective. So we do this in person right now. We have in the past used other tools. We're fortunate right now that we have people on the farm that are bilingual. So we have found personally at our place that they're most comfortable, the managers that are bilingual, to do the training in person and to do it face to face. We have used the software that Jennifer's company uses, and I would say that is an excellent tool that they offer to use if you don't have somebody that's bilingual for training. Their videos and just the whole setup of the software and keeping track of everything is a really good option. So, we would use that again if we needed to, but right now, what works for us right now is face-to-face training, one-on-one. But then the annual training is done in groups. And we used to have somebody that came in, and they're a great organization, and do the training, but we have long-term employees, and they were hearing the same presentation over and over again. And I decided to switch that up a little bit. So now for our annual training, there's team members that are assigned or, volunteer for certain sections of the annual training. So each team member is doing a specific part. And I have found that to be really good, because there's really good conversation. I think it takes those walls down. Nobody wants to hear me talk for an hour every year about safety stuff. And it's really engaged the rest of our team. I have to say, I'm really fortunate that our management team has really responded well to all these changes and are very engaged and find it very important also. So I'm not fighting that battle with our management team, and that's really fortunate for me. So. that kind of gives you an idea of what we're doing at the farm level. You know, we engage continued education. We're very fortunate in the area that we are, that we have a lot of opportunities that we can send employees to for continued education. You know, our cooperative is very forward thinking, and we have a peer group that we're able to send employees to, and they get, you know, it's a 6-unit throughout the year that go to different dairy farms within our cooperative. So that's really great continuing education for our team members too. So I don't know if there's any other questions that I could answer at this time.
Yeah, now is the perfect time. We'll open it up for general Q&A for Julie, for Jennifer, for both of them. Now we've got about 10 minutes, which is really great to kind of pick their brains a little bit more, especially if you have any, you know, specific questions. I have had a couple come through the chat, so I'll start with one of those, but then after that, I welcome everyone. You can unmute yourself, you can put them in the chat, whatever is easiest for you to do where you are. There was a question that came through a little earlier though that said, for onboarding, is there a difference between part-time and full-time hires and their onboarding experience? So for example, if you had some high school kids who milk a couple times a week.
At our place, we try to follow the same routine onboarding process. For us, it doesn't make sense to really do it different because it is required of us. So, and I think the consistency that Jennifer talked about is really important too. So it is an investment in those part-time employees, but we have found it to be worth it.
Yeah, I would concur 100% with Julie. Part-time should not be treated differently.
Great. Anybody else have any more questions?
I was just going to say one thing, you know, Julie was talking about her team taking on more of that training responsibility. That's, you know, really shows engagement. But that's another thing that I was excited to hear Julie talk about is providing training the trainer, right? Not all employees, even if they're the best employee, are very good at training, right? So also equipping our team to be better trainers, I think, is an area that can pay huge dividends.
And, you know, we've had the conversation over the last 2 years, I would say, you know, safety is important to us as the owners of the farm, but people have to take responsibility for their safety too, right? They have to slow down and they have to think, and they have to have that engagement and the welfare of themselves, because no matter how much we say their safety is important to us, if they don't start, you know, understanding that, it's really hard to get that across. So that's been some conversations that we've had also. And as part, I will say, safety is one of the things that we go through in their performance reviews. So, you know, they all have individual performance reviews, and safety is one of the, you know, 7 things that we go through. So they know it's important and it's part of their job review. So that's a good thing.
That's a great way to create that culture of safety by including that in job reviews. And I applaud you for doing, you know, job reviews annually. I think that's another area that gets neglected oftentimes.
Yeah, we have found it to be really helpful. I think once they got used to it, we've been doing that 7 years or so, and it's really helps. They look forward to it more so now, which is really good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I have a question quick. So Julie, you talked a little bit about how your onboarding process has kind of evolved. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What spurred you? I mean, there were probably multiple things, right, that had you change your onboarding process, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we just realized that as we were trying to meet all the requirements, I don't like doing things just to tick a box, like just to check a box. I mean, if I'm going to spend that much time on it, I want it to be effective and useful and to show some kind of difference. So I do think it did help us once we got focused on our farm values. It helped us give us a little bit more guidelines of what's important and how we want to portray that. We have always had a mission statement for a long time. I always found it kind of wordy and hard to get that, it was a little stiff. And I think just having those farm values and telling people what's important to us, I think it has helped us over the years to develop this and really do it in a way that is meaningful and that we do want people to feel like they're valued. So.
I have one more question, unless somebody else has another one. I'm curious about, okay, so there may be people that haven't done an onboarding process before and they don't even know where to start. So Julie, you talked about there were some state requirements that you had, but you were doing it before. And maybe Jennifer, you can jump in here as well. Talk about how we get started with this process if this isn't something that you've done before.
I love Jennifer's 4 C's of effective onboarding. I think that's a great place for somebody to start because I had written down notes of start with the compliance end first. If you're not compliant with forms, definitely do that first because you need to do that, right? Just start there and start ticking away those things. But then I really like this layout, Jennifer, that you had, shared with everybody. I think that's a great way to build upon that. So.
Yeah, and I pulled a lot of information on the National Farm Program website. They do have a whole slew of resources, and included those resources are the requirements for every state in the United States. So I would start there to make sure you have your compliance, and then I would review their workforce development handbook. It has so much information and a lot of and can really guide your way. And as I said before, first step back and say, hey, what am I doing now? And, and like I say, put yourself in the place of the employee and say, what would you need? And I think that those would be great places to start.
Excellent. And there was another question in the chat, which I think can kind of play off of your answer you just gave to ladies. Are there any tools to help you manage the training and expectations of employees, thinking of tracking, measuring progress, etc.?
Yeah, so that can be a real challenge, right? We have all these software systems that track, we know the reproductive cycles of our cows and all this type of thing. But in order to make sure training is getting done and keeping track of who's been trained, especially that ongoing training, we didn't talk about that today because that's post onboarding, but it's very important, that continuing education. It's really important to have a system in place and kind of a planned training program. And so, as I mentioned, Train Track and Dairy Kind are a couple of systems out there that have been designed to help organize that. With Train Track, in addition to delivering training, you can upload your farm-specific training. You can keep track automatically of who's completed the training. It will also let you know when they are due to renew their training, if they need to retrain on an annual basis or whatever period of time. So that is a resource. There's also, again, back to the farm program, they have some nice forms for helping you keep track of recording training and organizing training, and links to some great training resources.
And currently we do it kind of old school. We have training logs for all our training and we keep them in a notebook and we look through the notebook and figure out when trainings need to be done, ongoing trainings. And that's how we're doing it right now, but it's working for us.
What really is important, I'll just reiterate, is having someone that is coordinating that and staying on top of it. you really have to have a champion, and Julie is the champion at Patterson Farms, and that makes a huge difference.
Really great. We do have time for one more question if anybody has one to sneak in. You can put it in the chat like a lot of people have been doing, or you can unmute. Last call. Well, no worries. If something pops up and you've got a question, when we send out the recording, we will be sending Jennifer and Julie's contact information. So if something does pop into your brain afterwards and you're like, oh, I should have really asked that, you will still have the opportunity to connect with these ladies. And so with that, we are at time. This was a fabulous webinar. Thank you both, Jennifer and Julie, for sharing your insights and your expertise and what's been working for you. I also want to again thank Include for being today's sponsor of the webinar, and also Zoetis for sponsoring our web hosting and recording. Like I said, you all will get the recordings and that contact info and slide decks next week when we send these out. But other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Stay cool, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
You.